Okay, let's see. All right, we are live at the moment. So welcome everybody to the October meeting of the Citizens Advisory Board for the Clean and Renewable Energy Plan. And we are very happy that you're here. Thank you so much for spending the next couple of hours with us. We will go through the agenda, which will be the regular CAB meeting and some things we have to share with you, as well as an educational section and module at the end of it. Just a reminder about muting and if that's always helpful to keep the noise level down. And also, if you are having trouble with your bandwidth, you can go to not streaming video. Although we love to see people, so if you feel like you are comfortable with sharing, we love to see people's faces. And but we also understand that sometimes for bandwidth purposes, and the fact you want to drink your coffee or Coke, Diet Coke without anybody noticing, in my case, dribbling down my front, then that's okay too. So without any further ado on my part, let me turn this over to Megan and Bailey and the South Face team.
All right. The first question I have to ask the obligatory, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yep, you're on slide 3.
All right. Thank you. All right. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Once again, I'll just remind you that this is, hang on. This is a public meeting, and because of that, it's being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, and that link will be available to watch the recording later on the Athens-Clarke County website. Welcome all of the organizations that are here, and we'll just walk through quickly this agenda, which is early introductions, housekeeping. We'll recap the educational interest survey findings that you guys participated in after the last CAB call. Then we'll walk through the feedback we got from y'all on stakeholder engagement survey, map out our look ahead for next steps with the process, and dedicate the final hour or so to the greenscaping learning session that Mike just identified. So,
and Megan, can I mention real quickly, if folks on your email that I sent out with a meeting reminder, there was a YouTube link. If you looked at it, there is a YouTube link. That YouTube link can be sent to others so they can watch it. And you can also keep that YouTube link and go back to this same session at any time in the future. Essentially, it will work starting now. It's working actively now. And when they close it off, then it will be a permanent record on YouTube. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no, thanks for clarifying that for everybody. So let's go ahead. I know you guys all know each other, but just for the purposes of our record keeping, let's go around and do some quick, I won't say introductions, but maybe hellos across everyone. So let's go ahead and start with the CAB members, and then we'll move over to the project team.
Michael Songster here from 100% Athens. Good to see everybody.
I'm Tom Lawrence, faculty at University of Georgia, but I'm representing the Athens Green Building Council.
Mona Maddox, Athens Land Trust.
John Newland from Joma Construction, representing the Athens Area Home Builders Association. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Shane Blackwell is on YouTube. He was having some trouble tuning in, so I'm going to send him a link again, but he is present.
Charlie Glodenis, Athens Housing Authority.
All right. Is that everyone from the CAB?
Amy, did you speak up or did I miss you? Oh, you're on mute?
There we go. Okay. Amy Kassane, WNA engineer, and greetings all.
All right, then let's have the Athens-Clarke County staff go ahead and introduce themselves.
Mike Wharton with the Sustainability Office.
Maggie Songster with the Sustainability Office.
Ilka McConnell with the Economic Development Department.
Crystal Coburn with the Inclusion Office.
Melinda Lord with Housing and Community Development Department.
All right, and then on the South Face team.
I'll go. Bailey Shea with South Face Policy.
Mike Ford with the Education and Research. Talk to you all in a little while.
Right, and I'm Megan O'Neill with the South Face Policy and Sustainability Services team. So thanks all, it's good to have you here. So walking through our objectives, we're reviewing the educational interest survey, digging deeper into stakeholder engagement, and an intro to greenscaping in the context of clean energy. And we'd like you all to take away from this the look ahead for the stakeholder process. And yeah, I already said greenscaping and clean energy. So here we go. This is the feedback we got through the educational interest survey. Thank you very much to all of you for participating. We got some really good feedback both in the scoring and the write-ins. So in the white text in the top 4 boxes, you'll see these were the highest scoring items in terms of interest. So that was energy burden and housing inequality, greenscaping, energy and grid policy, and energy efficiency. So you might not be able to tell from the screen here, but slightly whiter on the table is energy efficiency. And I've indicated that just because our last education session touched on that topic. So really the top 3 items you see on this list are the ones that we're going to be covering in the look ahead. So I'll go ahead and just say that while the gray text, the gray boxes at the bottom received lower levels of interest in the survey, that doesn't mean we're not going to be delving into those in the months ahead. It just might be in a different forum or through some sort of special call meetings that might be identified as we move forward. So we'll still get there, just the top 3 are going to be our short-term priorities for education sessions. So I guess let's walk through, so I'm gonna reorder these slides just very quickly. So this is the schedule we have for the education sessions. Top 2 we already covered, Clean Energy 101 and Efficiency in the Built Environment. Today's greenscaping. November 4th is Energy Systems and Grid Policy, and November 18th will be Energy Burden and Housing Inequality. I'd like to do a quick poll of the participants here about the November 4th one, specifically because that's the day after the election, and we understand that that might not be a day that's great for group meetings. And so we wanted to take your pulse on if you'd prefer that we reschedule that or if we go ahead and stick with it. So what are your thoughts?
Might be a nice change of pace.
Yeah, let's stick with it.
Yeah, I'm good with the 4th.
All right, then I guess we'll plow ahead with that. Thanks for your feedback. So we'll get back to this one slide. So we sent out 2 surveys, one on education, one on stakeholder processes. And we just wanted to check in on if that's a good mechanism to use to collect feedback, if you found it easy to complete, or if there might be other processes that you think would be better for us to collect feedback from you on other topics as we move forward.
I think maybe the only, I think it's certainly an easy way to do it. The only thing I think that is is missing a little bit, especially since we're on remote, is the opportunity to kind of interact with other people. Because I think sometimes, if you were to hear someone else's viewpoint about one thing or the other, it might change your mind. And that, so, and it just, so, that's the only thing. I mean, I know we don't want to just get into the habit of sending tons and tons of emails all out to each other, and I'm not sure there's really anything to be done about that, but that is, that's one drawback to me.
Thanks, Amy. How about the others? Anything anyone wants to add? Okay, well, we'll be sending out a follow-up email to this meeting, so just let us know if you have any thoughts after this call that you want to make sure to add to that for our consideration as we move forward. All right, so now I'll go ahead and recap the stakeholder engagement survey. Before I dig in, I just want to say we had a very high response rate on the educational interest survey, but it was lower on the stakeholder engagement survey. So after we go through this report out, if you do have anything additional that you'd like to let us know, either through completing the survey, if you haven't already, we'll resend that link, but also if it's just easier to communicate via email, please let us know. We've got about let's say a week and a half where we can continue to consolidate feedback before we start getting things on the calendar. So just wanted to go ahead and flag that. So some themes from the survey that we got were deeper engagement required with faith-based organizations, small and locally owned businesses, rural areas, and youth and education stakeholders. And thankfully, all of you that responded indicate you're willing to help with this process. So thank you both for the survey as well as in advance for your support in those efforts. So these is just a summary of the additional organizations that were recommended through the survey. I'll leave this, I'm not going to read out each and every one of them, but I'm just going to leave this up for a moment so you guys can see. And we'll be sending this PowerPoint out in the meeting follow-up so you can review on your own later too.
Hey, Megan, this is Andrew. Is it all right if I add a little something while people look over this list?
Yeah, absolutely.
I noticed a little bit of confusion where we started seeing, as you looked over that list, there were some very important players missing, folks that are very influential in this space, which is yourselves. And so we actually started to see members of this advisory board nominate the institutions that other members represented, the Athens Land Trust or Athens Technical College, things of that nature. And so what you'll see in the following items that are presented is a theme that your groups that you represent are not explicitly put into any of these engagements because technically the door is open on all of them. We are hoping that as time permits that you will attend the charrettes with the broader group of stakeholders. And if you have good relationships with any one group, that you might help to facilitate the in-person meetings. Additionally, beyond that level of input, your organizations are afforded an even higher level of input and through your advisory nature. So for instance, we're not anticipating that we would sit down directly with 100% Athens or even some of the other organizations that are represented and saying, what do you think? Because we're hoping that you'll get familiar with every month you're coming and telling us what you think, and you're telling us what we're missing, and you're helping us to identify these gaps and opportunities. So I just wanted to acknowledge that in person, that is a peculiarity of this. And if you all at any point feel like that's insufficient, certainly don't hesitate to speak up, and we can revisit it. But that's why you saw those, quote unquote gaps in that list.
Andrew, it's something we absolutely want to communicate with y'all. So now I'm going to dig into a bit of a brainstorming exercise with you guys around the stakeholder engagement one-on-one meetings that we've talked about scheduling. We've more or less established that we're going to do 10 of these with various stakeholders locally. And I'll just go through the objective very quickly before I pull up the list for the exercise. The objectives when we're talking about one-on-ones is that we're going to have, there are a lot of organizations from which there's just a lot of value to having more candid, confidential conversations that are people who might not come to the table ordinarily, that might not be participating in group settings, that might just provide more comprehensive feedback through those one-on-ones. And so we've gone through, based on a lot of the feedback that you've submitted through the survey, as well as through some stakeholder groups we've identified, and created a preliminary list here. And the 5 that we've got populated in this table are ones that we just felt were absolutely essential to include. And then in the bulleted list on the right, these are organizations we have under strong consideration that we'd like to talk to you about to narrow down an additional 5 to put on this list. So Andrew, I don't know if you, or Mike, I don't know if you want to say a few words about the rationale with these first 5 that we identified.
Yeah, so what we've done here is we've tried to look at major energy and or policy entities within the community, and specifically organizations that are certainly might attend a larger charrette with multiple parties, but are less likely to reveal their hopes and dreams in that setting. So for example, Walton EMC could be, or one of the EMCs, we won't even pick a name, could be considering a solar program focused on commercial entities, as we've seen from some of the other utilities in the state. And they might be willing to pull the curtain back on that in a more intimate, semi-confidential setting, but they would not necessarily come and go to a group with a variety of their peers and say, here's what we're going to do. We can't wait to tell you. I mean, they're very intentional about their timing and messaging and so on. And so when we looked at those 5, we kind of felt like who are the ones that if we didn't have their feedback, would be most likely to create major gaps in the plans. 2 other quick important points. So we have these other entities on the right that we're looking to get your feedback on and hopefully slot the next 5 in there. Any entity on the right that does not make it into the batch of next 5 will have 2 things. One is we will be able to invite them to broader community charrettes with your input. And then the second is if through that process, we feel like we're still leaving behind the opportunity to learn things and craft our plan around their future actions and plans, we can come back and end up with slightly more than 10. But what we wanted to do was start with this batch of 10, pick them as if they're the only 10, let that process unfold. We'll be bringing those results back to you. You all will be participating in some of those discussions yourselves. And then kind of have an assessment amongst this group of, okay, are we good with the 10? Are we good with the 10 in the charrettes, or do we really need to have 2, 3, 4 more conversations in that one-on-one setting?
Thanks, Andrew. So I'll ask, I know this is a long list here, but if there's anyone that's just on the phone and can't see what I have up on the screen right now, can you let me know and I'll go ahead and just read through the list in full? Otherwise, I'll just trust that everyone can see it on their screen. All right, I'll take that as an indication everyone can see. So what are your initial thoughts about the folks on the right?
Actually, I have a couple of questions that pertain to both to this slide and the previous slide. One is when we were talking, one of the categories was sort of real estate and development, and all we have is realtors. There weren't any people included that actually developed and built buildings. And then one of the categories that was part of the list of stakeholder categories was transportation. And other than possibly including, the University of Georgia and their transit system, if we're going to ask them specifically about that, or the Clarke County School District and their busing system, we really don't have anything that's directed towards transportation. And when we got our presentation on where we use energy in Athens, significantly, the greatest proportion of energy seemed to be transportation. And so it seems as though that might be something we want to include here. I'm not sure exactly how we do that, but and there's nobody on that list on the right that fills that gap.
So can you be specific about, are there groups that you think would be there? Now, it's important to remember that there are some Athens-Clarke County focused charrettes that would involve things like the airport and Athens Transit. And then there are also still those group setting charrettes where you might have, say, a Bike Athens or the Athens in Motion Committee come together with other built environment type peers. So this list that you're seeing is not inclusive of everybody that we recommend be reached out to in this initial round of engagement. And
I think the other part of that is that the list you saw before this, Megan, can you go back one slide? That's additional stakeholders to the original list that was sent out. So there were several people on the original list already. So to your point on construction, we did have the Athens Area Home Builders Association. We also have some folks from that area that are representing. So make sure between the two lists that we've got everybody, because we're going to have these one-on-ones that'll happen, but we also have these more focus group where we're looking at those. That'll be coming up too. Megan, is that in your slide set as well, the ones on the focus groups? The 3 focus groups?
The next 4 slides
okay,
go into that in greater detail.
So that was a roundabout, but I guess the core question, Michael, still is do you, in your experience, think that some of those transportation or commercial construction or even residential construction entities are going to be hesitant to participate in a group setting? And then if so, are there specific entities that you recommend be slotted into this list of 10?
I'm not sure, and maybe it might be helpful if we could kind of skip ahead and see the whole overview of the entire process, so that we can go back and decide, who goes where. Because I'm not sure what the other slides are, and so I'm not sure who is most appropriate to place here versus a place in a slide further ahead.
You don't want to just guess with us? I think that's fair. I think we can move through the next few slides and then come back to this one if y'all would like.
Yeah, I have one suggestion I want to make. I want to see if they show up later on or not. So.
Megan, are you speaking?
I was, but I was on mute. Thanks, Mike. Okay. So just a quick refresher on these 2 terms we're talking about. When we're speaking about stakeholder engagement, we mean small groups of sector-specific organizations that are representing group-level priorities for a clean, renewable energy future. When we talk community engagement, we're talking about community-wide, speaking to the general public about individual family-level priorities as we move forward with clean energy planning. So this is the next steps in our process. We'll go ahead and get started on those one-on-ones, and that's going to be an ongoing process moving forward. for the stakeholder engagement, which will be conducted in dedicated small group charrettes. We have 3 distinct topics that we've identified before that are community and equity, which is going to include neighborhood, community groups, housing, faith groups, youth groups, and environmental groups. Clean energy economy, which would include energy service providers, jobs, economic development, higher education. Built environment, which is housing, real estate, large energy users. And then we'll also be scheduling internal meetings for Athens-Clarke County staff to talk about policy and energy use. That will be conducted in November and December of this year. So we're about ready to start scheduling once we get this plan finalized. Next up is community-wide engagement, which will start November 2020 and go well into 2021. We figure for community-wide engagement, especially when we're talking about town hall style meetings, community conversations to collect feedback, that it makes sense to wait until early into 2021 just to facilitate attendance, since these types of conversations tend to happen outside of business hours when people over the holidays tend to be less available. We're comfortable starting the stakeholder engagement this year because most of these are organizations that are able to meet within business hours, and it's just a smaller set of stakeholders to begin with. So when we're talking about community-wide engagement, that's going to include the launch of a clean and renewable energy survey to get community feedback on a number of issues. We will be sending a draft for your review as follow-up to this meeting. Please review and let us know if you spot any critical issues with the survey questions that are provided. In terms of a public outreach campaign, that's going to mean launching the radio PSA, the bill insert. Copies of those were distributed earlier into the CAP process over the summer, as well as social media outreach. And a lot of this is going to be directing people towards the survey for their feedback, as well as to spread awareness about the goal and tee things up for participation in community conversations when we launch them in early 2021. Then, okay, so that's the process we're talking about laying out. Does anybody have any questions before we go back to the list of stakeholders?
I thought there were other lists of stakeholders that were further down somewhere. Was that not true?
They are up here, so I can flip through those as well.
Okay.
So just when we're talking internal stakeholders to local government, these are city departments that we've broken down into energy users and policy drivers. We'll be engaging with these on an internal basis, and some of these folks may end up participating in some of the stakeholder charrettes. So then for those 3 topics we laid out of charrettes, the community and equity group includes everyone on this slide. This is by no means a final list. There's still about week and a half for you all to provide supplemental feedback on the list as we move forward. I'll give a minute for you all to just look at this list. You might see some organizations on multiple lists if they're very large organizations that might have different stakeholders within them, where one might be able to provide, that might have a stake as well as provide feedback on more than one topic. So one example might be UGA. They have a lot of stakeholders within the university that could provide content on a lot of different topics. So next up, we have the clean energy economy charrette right here.
Just quick note, you have Athens Area Community Foundation twice.
We will only send them one invite.
But we're hoping they might provide grant funding for a lot more than once. Welcome, Shane. I'm glad you were able to join us.
Me too. How's everybody doing?
You've been able to keep up with what we're doing through the YouTube, or do you need a quick overview?
No, if I can get a quick overview, or I can just go back and review the tape once we complete it, that'll be great. I think that'll be best so we keep things moving.
So we're looking at stakeholder groups right now. We've got two different lists that we're looking at. One of them is the one-on-one stakeholder interviews that we would have, the more focused group. And then we would have what the second group of organizations are aimed at focus groups with larger audiences that have similar interests and input. And we're looking at the economy. Help me out here. The three ones were economy, the built environment, or the environment, and community and equity. So we're kind of going through the list to see if there's anything that jumps out. Give people kind of a run through, and then we're going to go back to the one-on-ones and kind of see if there's people feel strongly about which groups should be where. Knowing at the end of this, that's always opportunity as people get a chance to reflect and kind of dig in a little bit more to reflect and provide additional feedback from there.
So with the clean energy economy, I mean, I guess one thing that might be helpful for me is to hear just briefly kind of what the kind of the criteria or what you were thinking. I mean, for instance, with this, it seems like we should be interested in the people who train people for jobs, the people who might need and have those jobs, industries that might, industries that could move into those jobs or be entrepreneurs. I mean, I don't see Clarke County School District or Athens Tech on this list. And I'm just, and I don't know, it seems like if there are industries in our community that are already part of the clean energy economy, but they might have come about, well, if Athens-Clarke County did X, Y, or Z, we could actually expand our business to do this. So yeah, I mean, just kind of what the concept was in coming up with this list.
Just what you said when it came to economy. So that's why we were looking to see who else people felt should be on the list. So yes, the first one was community and equity. So kind of looking for people that advocate and look at policies and procedures and community education. The second one was more of just what you said with jobs and actual training or job opportunities. And the last one, which is the looking at the environment and built and natural environment, and the industries and policies that are associated with that.
Could I see the first page? Thank you.
Well, there's one group on there, or there's one group that I don't see in this one right here that might be considered, and also maybe considered for the built environment. And maybe they're on the built environment one. We haven't got to that one yet, but the Athens Habitat for Humanity, I haven't seen them pop up yet.
Athens Land Trust as well.
Land Trust has been someplace along there. Yeah.
The land trust is on the cab, so.
Okay.
But I think you're right. I think Habitat would be a solid add to
Well,
they're
they're on the built environment, but also like they might fit into the first one as well, because they're basically managing and working with people. Some of them actually moving from homeless to home ownership type basis. And full disclosure, I'm on the Habitat board. I was president 10 years ago. I'm kind of permanent secretary now, and I know Spencer very well, so I could help arrange that if you needed.
Another one we might want to add for the built environment is there's actually an Athens area apartment association which I believe is an association of different departments, but I don't think that I see them on the list, but I might have just missed it.
Well, and going back to Michael's point before, I'm not sure I see on this list, I think, people in the building industry who would be tasked with consulting with property owners to get them through any regulations or whatever. I think it's important to have people represented who go through that process, approval process with planning commission and that sort of thing. And so, because I think they have an insight, and I would say W&A engineering would be one of those, have an insight into that process and how, not that they will be opposed to regulation, but how those regulations, how they're implemented, how they could impact, so that can all be taken into account. And I don't know that I really see those groups, and as Michael pointed out already, I think represented here.
Could we scroll back to the community page?
So we're getting some good stuff, and I think we're furiously taking notes here. The other thing to keep in mind is this is the good time to figure out, like we're doing, which ones are here and which ones aren't. But we will alphabetize these and send them out to you, and so you'll have about another week if another one pops into your mind after this these few minutes here.
This community and equity, I would say, unless I'm just not seeing them, East Athens Development Corporation needs to be there.
Also on the cab.
Gotcha.
Los Promotores within our Latinx community, I think would be a good addition to this list. The Athens Justice and Memory Team is the mayor-appointed, group or team that's tackling Linentown, and it's a resident-led committee led by Ms. Hattie Whitehead. They are separate from the Linentown project. They would probably also be another good addition to this list.
Is Athens for Everyone on a list somewhere? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. We'll go ahead and add that to our notes.
I mean, they have such a broad, they have a pretty, they have a broad range of, I don't know whether they would make sense to put on a possible, that stakeholder list, just because they do have such, I think, a pretty broad reach into the community with a wide variety of issues. Versus just being in one of these groups, I'm not sure.
I don't think Athens for Everyone is quite as broad as it was maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're at that level.
Okay. I still think they should be on maybe the community and equity list, I guess. And
yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
So if you guys don't, I'm sorry, is that Andrew?
I just want to quickly ask, does anybody on this call know what their organizational status are? Are they like a 501c5 or 3 or?
I believe they're a C3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
Well,
did you have something to
add? I don't know. Now I'm questioning myself. They may be a C4.
Oh, yeah, they probably, that's true. They do put out political, whatever.
So I'll just add this and then maybe we'll look to the group to inform. When I've worked on past efforts on behalf of government, there has been a desire to avoid C4s and I think C5s because they do step strongly into the political realm. And so the simplest way it's been pointed to me is, would you invite the Democratic Party or the Republican Party to come and provide this feedback? Now, this is a bit of a different animal on this plan, so I'd say we'll follow y'all's lead. So with that context in mind, are you all looking to have them added? And if so, what charrettes do you recommend?
I mean, I think they've been in the community a while and they have a strong community voice. I mean, I'm not follow them avidly, but I mean, it seems like they should be included.
One more addition to what Andrew said, we will have another round of public meetings. So if you feel like their input is better in the public arena, those will come up as well. But again, we will follow y'all's lead on what you think on that.
My feeling is that this this transition and the hurdles that we face are equally, if not more so, political issues than they are engineering and technology issues. And so having an outlook that is political is actually not a detriment, it's probably an advantage.
So do people see that they fit best under this group or under multiple groups?
I mean, is it worth, I just wonder, I mean, one, we have a lot of groups on these lists. So one question I have is, are we thinking that there's going to be some self-selection, that if people get an invite and they're like, I don't know what the hell this is about, and I don't see that this is relevant, so I'm not going to participate. So are we assuming that that's going to happen? One. Two, I wonder if we shouldn't give the groups an opportunity for them to decide which of these they feel like they're most, why should we decide for them where they think, they belong, or they may want to come to multiple. So, I mean, I would be tempted to send, these are the 3 charrette groups we're going to have, please let us know. I just, because it seems to me that some might think, we might assume it's community and equity, and they might say, no, I think the economy is the group that I am interested in, the group that I represent. This is what we are most interested in. And also, having an explanation of what kinds of questions are going to be talked about, what kinds of information. I think when we invite people, there needs to be a clear understanding of, of what we're going to be getting at and what kinds of questions will they be asked and what kinds of input will they be asked to give. So I'm not sure we should decide for them what group is most appropriate.
So I can go ahead and take that one, and Andrew might please chime in. So I think I'll stress that what we're talking about right now is initial conversations, and there can certainly be more conversations as we go deeper into this. And I do think you're right, Amy, that some people are going to kind of self-select and opt in, opt out. But that doesn't mean that we can't have follow-up conversations with them on dedicated topics later. And the conversations we have, we're absolutely going to follow your guidance on sending out some clear objectives for what we want these people to meet on, what kinds of questions and discussion points they can anticipate. But we're going to build in some flexibility throughout these individual meetings, where if they go in a different direction and it makes sense to stick with that, we'll see what people have to say. This isn't necessarily a rigid proposal where we're only going to talk about community or equity issues. If the topic of economic inclusion or development comes up, there will be an opportunity to discuss that, because we want to hear the expertise and the knowledge that these people have. And you're right, it would be presumptuous to assume that they only have one point of view to contribute.
I agree with that. This is Tawana. I hate that I've missed this, but we have a staff meeting the same time. That's what I'm sorry. I wanted to know if the inner we have several interdenominational pastor groups in Athens. And I want to know if they would be considered. I mean, they have a large following, but I think that would be easy to access people at the community level. So I just wanted to know, I'm just looking at this slide, so I don't know if they're on a different slide or not.
I'm not aware of them being on a slide, and I think they are a good way to get more plugged into the community. Tawana, are you familiar with any kind of, what's the best way to get plugged into them? Is there a regular meeting or a lead contact, or how do we go about doing that?
I feel so awful with names right now. I'm Zoom burned out, but I really am. But I know Abraham Mosley is a very good contact. I don't know if he's still the president, but he's definitely one over at Mount Pleasant. I could definitely get you his contact number. I know B.A. Hart is a pastor who does a lot of community things. He's at First AME. And then I cannot think of the pastor who just resigned who retired, I meant from the church on Millage. But he was a part of that intergenerational, very active in that as well. So I can get the information for you. I just right now my brain's fried.
Tawana, this is Bailey from
Yes.
South Face. I helped facilitate the survey that you filled out, and I know that you listed some of those contacts. Remember, you answered twice, and I know that what I'm thinking is that probably it was in your first answer where you put those contacts. So I'll go dig those back up, and we'll contact you if we need.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah,
I
think that's probably what happened here, is that it was in one answer and not the other, and that's why I didn't get on this list.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. And I understand the Zoom burnout. No worries.
We did also talk about the interfaith group, and I think they're called something different now. Did we look at those as a one-on-one, or are we thinking they were under the community group? I can't remember because it was part of our discussion.
Let me pull up the one-on-ones so we can see.
Okay, thank you. They aren't there. I do know, to Tawana's point, we had discussion on interfaith groups and what that meant. If there was more of a collective interfaith group that had several representatives from several organizations, or is it better to try to reach out to individual pastors? So some help and guidance there in reaching the faith community on kind of collectively or individually, which one's best. Or both. So at this point, are people feeling like sorry about that, the best avenue is for us to continue on? You'll get this slide presentation. Maybe, do you need it in a list form? But basically kind of looking at that, I think part to Amy, to your question or your statement, observation, which was a good one, about self-selecting or not. Part of what we were wrestling with is the presentation format and how to make it so that we balance the number of participants, so that we can, because the idea is we're going to be going to a video format. But we want to be able to also create small groups through that and have interaction at a small group level with that process. We're examining that right now, of how do you create breakout groups in an electronic format. And so I think that's kind of what we were also wrestling with, is how we create a more manageable. And we could do a registration, but then you lose people by doing that. So it's not an easy question. So any feedback like yours, we welcome and appreciate in trying to wrestle with what's the best approach to take with this in a unprecedented way of formatting stuff.
So, sorry, am I cutting someone off? Is that an echo of my voice?
Go ahead, Crystal.
We can hear you okay.
Okay. I would find the echo of my voice far more disturbing. So recently, I was able to attend the Jeanette Rankin Foundation luncheon, and they did breakout groups, I thought, in a pretty effective way. So there was a point person that was essentially running the room being each of the smaller breakout conversations, and each of those point people had gone through some sort of advanced training to prepare them to keep the conversation moving in the breakout room. And that, so there was like a big group together period, out to the breakout room, set list, of questions, and then back together, to the group again. And so that is, one possibility of facilitating this online. I will share, the inclusion office wrestles with this day in and day out. The reality is that there has to be a way to meet people within our communities right where they are. And sometimes that really means picking up a phone. Before the pandemic, it was trying to get like one's physical body into physical spaces. In the midst of the pandemic, a phone call seems to be, the next best thing. And if at all possible, planning a series of phone calls, right? So not like first call, I need something, but first call, hey, touching base, just wanted to let you know, here's something that we're working on, just building that connection. Second call, hey, wanted to touch base again. Do you have any questions about what we're working on? Second/third call, here are some things, some next steps that you might be able to take. How can we support you in being an ongoing participant in this process? So that's one thought. Another thought is within our local community, there are some communities who are very, very accustomed to being forgotten and left behind. If those communities, if we don't make contact with them up front, then it may be a bit harder down the line to sort of generate that sense of buy-in. So if kind of come and say, so here's the pre-packaged, here's what's going to happen, then that could very easily and quickly cut against the grain, I think, of the kind of engagement that this group is wanting to create.
I think that was one comment I had in terms of the stakeholder engagement. And just looking at the list, I thought, these are going to be some of the first meetings we have. And so it might be important to choose a few groups, kind of to Crystal's point, that get to a population, for instance, I'm not rural areas or I don't know if the Neighborhood Leaders Family, the Athens Immigrant Rights Coalition, have a few groups on there that represent a broad swath of our community, so that we can hear from them and kind of maybe get some early on red flags that we might not be thinking of, or just help to guide us in how we do reach certain demographics that, as Crystal said, a lot of times don't get brought into the process until later. And maybe Crystal has some good thoughts for, but I think that we should engage with those groups as early as possible, just to help guide the rest of our process.
That's really great feedback, Crystal and Amy.
Part of what I'm hearing here is an acknowledgement that for this communication to be effective, it has to be genuine. And for it to be genuine, we can't just drop in on people and say, what do you think? That there have to be actual relationships in place. And then even after we get the feedback, maintaining those relationships so that it is more of a partnership moving forward. A question I would have is, we have 10 plus organizations represented on this CAB that do touch into economic development, construction, housing, community groups, business development, so on. So are there going to be natural places where you all as CAB members can help to create that meaningful connection? Or is there something else we need to be thinking of?
But I definitely saw myself in that way of being associated in different areas, but definitely I'm, one who looked to the rural area. I grew up in the rural area, so I always want to make sure that, that the rural areas are included early. I really appreciate Crystal's comment. And so I definitely see myself as that being a strength that I can bring to this process. This is Tawana.
And Andrew, the Housing and Community Development Department has an existing relationship with many of the nonprofit organizations within the community that we can certainly take advantage of as far as making or continuing those connections, but expanding on what we're, working with them to achieve. So, we're happy to step in that capacity.
So I think in addition to hearing from some group, some additions to these lists, two things that I've heard is, one, do we want to make these charrettes available and let groups self-select where they feel like their communication is most meaningful or most aligned with their objectives? And then the second is this broader conversation about connection. So now that we have got, let's call this the 70% approach of a healthy slate of folks, are you all comfortable if we bring that back to you in an organized fashion, and we can, if you all could help indicate if you have a relationship with those folks? So I mean, for instance, I have connections back to Goodwill, so I could easily pick up the phone and rely on that relationship to explain what's going on and try to create that feedback. And I'm sure many of you have similar things. Is that something that the CAB is comfortable with?
I would be. I think that would be a good approach.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like we've got our next steps in that regard. Are you all ready if Southface and Mike kind of go back into this one-on-one discussion? Do you feel like you've got a pretty good understanding of the difference between the charrettes versus the one-on-ones?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Take it away, folks.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So now that we've got a little more grounding in the other stakeholders we're looking at in the forums in which to engage, I've pulled up the top 10 list for us to go ahead and fill out. So I'll just go ahead and ask for your preliminary thoughts on this. And just to revisit the objectives of these, some criteria to keep in mind when thinking through who should be in these one-on-ones are organizations that we absolutely know need to come to the table for a successful clean renewable energy plan development, as well as ultimately implementing it to make sure that this clean energy transition is successful. And think through what organizations might be more likely or might be more reluctant to share their thoughts in larger forums, and where more candid conversation might be a more productive way of getting information from them. And I also neglected to say earlier that we'll be sharing general feedback that we receive in these conversations. It might not be attributed to specific organizations, but we'll be letting you know about the tone of the conversations we're having and key findings.
I was kind of curious. You got the couple EMCs, but Georgia Power's not on there. I think they have just as much of a skin in the game as anybody else, other than the EMCs. Just my thought.
So when you say business industry leaders, what are some examples of who would be included in that?
I think I can speak to that. This is Ilka McConnell.
Mhm.
So I think that group is yet to be defined, but I know several of them fairly well over the years, just from previous lives. So I think what we'll do is start with some of the ones that I think will be most enthusiastic about it, and then we can start with that group and kind of build from there. Some of the larger industries that are large users of energy.
Well, being some of the largest employers in the area, as well as I'm sure the largest energy users, certainly St. Mary's and Athens Regional would have a big influence.
So do the business and industry leaders, do that compose of a lot of the other businesses that's on the list on the 3 pages? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the chamber. I mean, it's kind of an overlap there.
Mm-hmm.
And Shane, I think what we're looking at with, and I think that's part of the question of business and industry leaders, does that even need to be subdivided into small businesses versus larger industries?
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because you got University of
Yeah,
Georgia.
I agree with that.
And that may be kind of a division that needs to be made there, which would take slot 6 and leave us then with 4 more slots to put in. We would have to then look at what's the small business, what qualifies as small businesses, and then what's the best way to reach that group and how to define that group.
It seems like that's going to end up, well, is that going to be more of a charrette then? I mean, or something, one of these, kind of a hybrid between what we're thinking of these stakeholder meetings, and because it seems like we might want to think about those. I mean, the chamber, I think, should be included in that group potentially, and maybe the Northeast Georgia Business Alliance, are there business groups that, organizations that represent businesses that we should put into that. And
so I think for some of these, we're double counting potential organizations within the one-on-ones as well as with the charrettes, because there is a lot of benefit to including them in group forums as well as one-on-one.
Yeah.
We might just get different kinds of feedback in a one-on-one versus what they'll say in that group setting. But in many cases, it's going to make sense to invite them to both.
And someone explain to me number 3 and number 4 when we got so many others that's here in Athens.
So we have 4 total electric providers in Athens. We have Georgia Power, Jackson EMC, Walton EMC, and to a small degree Rail. When it comes to natural gas, we technically have one source, which is Georgia Power, but then as an unregulated industry, just about anybody can sell it to you at the end point. And so the initial thought was Georgia Power. We've heard at least one member already say, hey, that they probably should be afforded this opportunity. I know from my experience, there have been some discussions with the mayor and with our team and others. So I feel like I have somewhat of an understanding, but on the other hand, there may be additional things to learn. Specifically, Walton and Jackson are slated because they represent 15 to 25% of our county user base. And they actually, the EMCs have the ability to become quite innovative if they would like to be. Walton EMC launched one of the first community solar projects in the state. Jackson EMC is one of the few in the state with if not the only one with a solar rebate.
Mm-hmm.
And so my recommendation to you all is I think there's a lot of meat on the bone with those two, and there may be with the others. Specific to rail, we're looking at well under 10% of county energy users represented through their customer base. It tends to be very far east side and right adjacent to Oglethorpe County. We've approached them as Athens-Clarke County on a couple of items. They're not. I want to choose my words carefully. They're certainly not opposed to any sort of innovation. They're kind of a business as usual group.
And that's Oglethorpe, right?
Rail does have heavy service in Oglethorpe County, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one thought that's really just pressing in my head. On this list, the bulleted list, I noticed we have Hancock Community Development Corporation. Do we not have East Athens because they are a part of the CAB?
Yes.
That's why, okay. Because I'm just thinking about minority participation, and they are two sides of towns and trusted, that's why I asked. Thank you.
And we're also looking at, we want to, part of what our initial talking and thinking is that we have 10 slots, initially at least, not a whole lot more than that. And we want to have a broad a swath as possible. So how do we do that at the 101? And so which one of those of the list or people that should be added, really we need to hear their one-on-one input as opposed to more of a potential for a charrette, which is why we got to the groupings of the charrettes so that we could be more focused on getting feedback in those areas.
So I have two things. I guess I have a question about the structure of how the number 5 fits into the one-on-one meeting. So if we're talking about plural leaders in that case, like is that going to be a mini charrette that we're going to have with that? And if we break that out into small business versus industry leaders, or are we going to have two sort of mini charrettes there? And so we would be suggesting a handful of small or local businesses that could be slotted into that. And then my next point is I think that the neighborhood leaders, and this is kind of back to Amy's, something that Amy had said and Crystal had said about engaging people early. So Athens Immigrant Rights and neighborhood leaders, bringing them in as a group at this point. And part of it is the benefit of hearing what they may have to say, but also engaging them early so that as this process unfolds, we've made that connection and can build that relationship further. And I think that would penetrate deeply into the community for residents and individual residents, maybe better than talking to the Chamber of Commerce, for example. But so I guess my question on number 5 and then my feedback on the 2 additional members.
And I might throw in the Council on Aging also as an organization that, obviously has a very strong connection to an important demographic. So kind of along the same lines as the neighborhood leaders and the Athens Immigrant Rights.
Well, you guys are definitely touching on the same conversations that we were having internally, and we were hoping you could give us a little bit of your insight and knowledge and guidance and how to conclude that. We did discuss and open it up to you guys. What do you think about having more mini charrettes around some of these, like business and large and small businesses? Is that going to be a more effective tool, or is there more? And the same thing with the other remaining slots. Do we try to look at 2 or 3 groups that we bring in, or is it more effective to just have the one group that we need to hear from? It's a little clearer on the first, 4 or 4 that they're individuals, so to speak, or individual groups. It starts getting a little murky where that line starts breaking out between small group, one single group, small group, and then more charrette or topic-oriented focus group. So what do y'all think about what's the best approach for getting to everybody in the community, as many people as we can?
I agree that if you're going to choose individual organizations, you run out of them quickly, I think, considering who is going to provide the kind of impact you want to do, and when you only have 10 slots. And so I think it does make sense that you would have, some of those at least be groups of 3 or 4 or 5 in kind of a mini charrette. And so whether that, like I said, local businesses, the industry leaders, I don't know but yes, I think that would be more effective.
So if you were going to go that direction, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna, Mike, you go ahead and finish your point and then I'll speak up.
I was just going to say, if we were to go the direction, I think, Michael, if I interpret it correctly, kind of more topic oriented under the stakeholder one-on-one meetings, are similar group organizational kind of structure. So if that was the case, then you start getting to picking and choosing among the variety of groups. So that would need some help there too.
maybe we structure it in some way, to Amy's point previously, where we could structure it around maybe topics or affinity groups, and then people can self-select to where they would like to attend and provide input.
And I think that's what we heard for the focus charrettes, that might be the one at least one avenue of moving. And we haven't heard kind of how the group feels about that self-selection versus. So that would be a question out for that one. I think on the one-on-ones, it typically you do that with one representative organization or one individual. So I guess what I was hearing is the possibility of kind of bumping out the one-on-ones to having a little bit more flexibility on representation. But I guess what I'm also wrestling with myself is, when does that bump out and it becomes its own little charrette, kind of getting up to that bigger group charrette level?
Well, again, I mean, I guess if these stakeholder meetings to me are taking place, they're about the first thing that takes place. I think we should, look at it as something that might give us information to inform those later charrettes and might change some of our thinking about those. And it seems to me that you have some groups like the University of Georgia, they're not going to want to have their stakeholder meeting with 3 other large groups. I mean, there's some of these stakeholders that either they feel they have proprietary information in order for them to be honest with us. They're going to have to be one-on-one. And that could be true for the EMCs too. I really don't know. I mean, business industry leaders that are not, I think you probably could group, find some and group them so that it's an early stakeholder meeting to kind of, again, help us understand maybe, wow, we're really not, people don't understand this, or we need to be sure, to help us understand how we move forward. So to me, the business, the industry leaders, I don't know how you divide them, or if there's 2 groups, small and large, but I do think they could be a stakeholder, but have multiple parties participating in those. And it might be the same thing for when we're thinking about demographics in the community, that maybe, for the Latinx community, for the Latinx demographic, is Athens Immigrant Rights Coalition the only group that we bring in to help us understand how we make sure that we, get some of the issues brought forward to us, but also help understand how we reach that community. I mean, there may be multiple groups that come in to speak to us about the Latinx community. Same for, neighborhood groups. So I think that stakeholder thing, there are going to be some groups that are going to have to be one-on-one or need to be one-on-one. There could be others where we're more looking at, and we're looking for we're trying to reach as broad a part of the community. I don't think we want these stakeholder meetings to look like we're just going to the usual suspects, the big dogs, the people who have to be, have to be petted and make sure they're treated right. We don't want it to look that way. I think we want these stakeholder meetings at their first to say we are looking at trying to encompass as large a part of our community as possible so that when we take the next step, we are as well informed about that community as possible.
So is what I'm hearing.
I think.
And I think that maybe we need to group 3 and 4 together, put some of them in the same kind of category together, like with some of the schools. I don't, was Athens-Tech in there? I mean, like maybe have the University of Georgia and some of the school systems together. Then have some of the businesses together and go from there.
So what I am hearing is industry leaders, small businesses, neighborhood. Is there kind of those groupings right now are what popping out? Is there I heard immigrant community, what are those, what would, if you were going to put groups together, what would they focus on? What would that title or that group look like?
Mike, if you, maybe one option, and I want to flag that we're running low on time to pivot to the greenscaping session, but maybe one approach here with this list would be, can we identify who absolutely needs to be a standalone meeting and then work backwards for how we can group some of these others together? Or if there's anyone on this list that we just don't think warrants a one-on-one?
That works for me. Feedback from the group. For now, do you have somebody you would add, Shane?
No, I'm asking, she's saying getting feedback, is it just this listing right here?
I think if there's somebody you feel like needs to be a one-on-one, that you can bring that one forward. These are all just initial ideas. These are not written in stone.
I want to quickly revisit. Amy, did I just hear you suggest that that we should be intentional about having the kind of the bigger charrettes before we go one-on-one? And really one of the main reasons for that is so that it doesn't create the perception that we're kind of meeting with the bigger power players before speaking with the community. Is that a correct summary?
No, I'm okay with the initial stakeholder meetings. I was just saying that it seemed like there are some groups that we, like, for instance, I'm guessing the University of Georgia needs to be a one-on-one. I don't know about others. They're probably, and Walton and Jackson EMC, it sounds like from what you said, Andrew, that they have, they have a lot of potential and there's a lot of reason to talk to them individually. So but I'm just thinking, like with the business industry leaders as an example, where I'm not sure that we need to pick one business, one small business, one large business to represent that. I think we could combine them. I think the Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Realtors, the commercial realtors could potentially be part of that. So I think these initial stakeholder meetings could be a combination of one-on-ones, and then, I mean, not want 20 people there, but try to come up with some groups that represent a certain topic area, whether it's immigrants or whether it's neighborhoods or whatever. So I don't know, is that clear?
Yeah, so it's almost like a one-on-one, or what we might call a micro charrette, 3 to 5 folks that are very comfortable with each other.
Yes.
And not afraid to share their ideas and opinions, and especially with no risk of, say, sharing proprietary information.
Right. Yes.
I believe, Megan, I think you had told me that when you worked on your last plan, you had, I don't remember how many dozen one-on-ones, that it was a very extensive process. Is that correct?
70. I went back and checked.
If the planning team's okay with it, I'd say, can we explore this a little bit through this continued input from the CAB, where we're going to reach out to y'all and basically ask you to try to aggregate these one-on-ones or micro charrettes in a way that makes sense to you. But keep in mind that really, if we, especially in a Zoom environment or something similar, if we get above 3, 4, 5 folks, we may actually not create that environment that we're looking for. To facilitate that more direct, candid feedback. Are y'all okay with that approach?
Andrew, I'm okay with that, but back to what you asked initially, I don't want to see where the big wheels are the only initial stakeholders engaged in the beginning. I have that's personal for me. I would want to see I would like to see that mixed up.
Yeah, I think Southface can jump in, but I believe these were meant to be concurrent. So it wasn't that we were going to do the one-on-ones and then do. So it'll be on any given week or any given 2-week period. There might be one bigger community charrette and 1 or 2 meetings.
Okay.
And again, our next steps after slotting these is to share prospective meeting dates with you all, so that you could say, for instance, if we're going to go with somebody representing, let's say, small business, we might have Northeast Georgia Business Alliance say, like, hey, I'd love to jump in on that. I feel like not only do we have things to add, but I can help facilitate that conversation. So those are our 2 next steps, is to finalize this list. I think we've all heard some. We could almost create a straw man list, and then y'all could build or remove around that.
Andrew, can we circle back to what you threw out there about having the larger charrettes first, or at least a portion of them first? Is there any value in using the larger charrettes to identify groups or individuals that would fit well into remaining slots that we may have for the one-on-one meetings, where there's clearly a potential relationship that can be developed, or that there is quality information that is shared, but we need to delve. There's the opportunity to delve deeper. Is that at all valuable as an approach?
I think it is. I think also in Athens, probably most of us have been in a community meeting where 1 or 2 folks start to dominate that discussion pretty quickly. If we hold a few open, or even just know that we're going to have a handful of them running after the fact, it allows the planning team the opportunity to approach them and say, Michael, it seems like you have a lot you want to share with us. Would you like to sit down for an hour sometime next week and give us that information and let us know what you think? Is a way to somewhat disarm that approach, and make sure that people are heard, but in that act of expressing themselves, they don't silence others.
And following up with that too, I would want to say that the CAB members, each of you, we see that as a key role you can help play in gathering that information, extending this input process that is not just the South Face team, it's not just sustainability and central services, but it's really all of us collectively are the planning team. So however we get there, we really, you play a critical role in making sure that this information comes forward. If we're missing things, that's exactly where, or if somebody's out there that needs to be heard, if it's setting up that meeting and getting that information and helping us gather that, then that's why we're working together on this one.
I'll be honest, I'm confused about what I'm becoming confused about what are we trying? What is the message? What are we trying to do? I was thinking one way, but now I'm thinking something different because I was thinking about youth organizations. A lot of times are left out, and they have when it comes to families, direct families, with information. But what are we trying to do with this first level? In this first level of engagement, I'm confused a little bit.
Tawana, would it be helpful, you think, to give you some examples of different plans that have been done so that people can kind of see what the end result is? Would that be helpful?
Yes, I would really appreciate that.
Like an outline of of some plans that we found, or the plans themselves, just to read through to kind of see what level of end result we're looking for?
Yes, 'cause I don't want to speak out of turn, and I'm feeling kind of confused a little bit now. I would appreciate that.
So we'll work on getting something to you this week. How about that?
Thank you.
So that would help kind of give the big picture of what we'll try to find several examples but provide you with at least an outline of one that you can look up and read. If you have insomnia, you can read through it and it'll definitely help. But something that kind of frames out what a energy plan looks like. And then so to this exercise, what we're trying to also do is then find the groups and the individuals whose voices are critical to hear that can help inform that plan and shape that plan that matters here in Athens. So that's really kind of, I guess, that connection point. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is that what would be helpful for the cab group is for us to try to put together the list based on both the one-on-one list based on individuals that like UGA that we probably need to hear from specifically, and then maybe some smaller focus groups. I heard small business, industry leaders, neighborhoods, interfaith. Do we want to do a immigrant or so what would the other topics be that we would want to focus on would be helpful? Because right now, if we did those, that would be what, 8? And we'd have 2 more topics, is that right? Yeah.
We heard at least one vote for hospitals, one vote for Georgia Power, and some feedback in favor of the Council on Aging.
So a senior group or senior focus. But are we missing?
There was at least one vote for the Immigrant Rights Coalition too.
Is there a need can small businesses, will we reach the point that we need to if we go for small businesses, or do we need to have that even subdivided? Do we need to have minority businesses? Do we need to get to that level of subdivision, or are we good with just it being, will people feel like their voice is being heard if we go with the broader categories? So I guess I'm looking at equity and minority representation and voice.
I think if we get it out in time, I think it'll work. I think if we put it out, not a last minute thing. I noticed that some people in the community, in the minority community, said that they received things at the last minute and expect to get on Zoom calls in 20 minutes or an hour, and or they don't get the information at all. So as long as we able to present it in a manner that they have time enough to adjust their schedule, I think it'll work for small business as well as for minority businesses.
Okay. And you feel like, just to follow up, you feel like they'll feel free enough to communicate their needs within the community in that format?
Yes.
But right now I have small business, breakout industry leaders into business, industry, big business and small business, neighborhoods, interfaith, senior, hospitals, and immigrant. Is there any other group that we've left out?
Did you mention, I thought you mentioned the faith group the first time around,
Yes.
the faith group.
If I'm skipped over that, I apologize. That's on my list. Yes.
And with the small business group, could it be small business / nonprofit? But not all nonprofits are small, but I think nonprofits.
So you think nonprofits need to be in their own group?
They could. We have 1 million of them in Athens. We definitely.
Because I mean, just my first thought would be, kind of reaction was, it's a little bit different business model between a nonprofit and a
Yeah.
business.
Okay. Well, I didn't know how the slots are taken up over there, but yeah. But I definitely think nonprofits should be included.
So right now I've got 8 plus 4. So we got 12 slots that, if we followed this, do you want us to try to work with those 12 and see what we come up with, and then get you to add or to delete from that? Do you want to take those and then fill them in and let us work from there? Put you on the spot with that one.
You go first.
Yeah. Hey, I asked the question.
Yeah, I think this format makes it hard to kind of whittle it down as a group. I think it'd be better to react to whatever, have this, you populate it, we react to it at this point. I think it's better the way that we're kind of structured here.
Agreed.
So in terms
I agree with that.
Okay, great. Then we can go ahead and send out that list for you guys to react to. And in that same questionnaire, we'll also more or less send out a list of everyone we identified in the later slides and provide opportunity for you to indicate if you have relationships with them, which we were touching on earlier in this call.
And can I ask one more question? If we send this out and you have a group like interfaith, do we want to limit it to no more than 4 or 3, and kind of force the discussion around, okay, what 3 most important, what 4, understanding that we have this bigger focus group, which are the ones that are key that we need to speak to, and what's the limit on that? Is it because before we lose that small group interaction via Zoom calls? Is it 3? Michael says 4.
I say 3 to 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say 5.
Yeah, I go with 5.
I think it'll really depend. I think,
So I'll
no
leave it
more than
open.
5.
I'll leave it open as 3 to 5, and then we can see from there. Is that okay? All right, Megan, unless other people have feedback, I think we've got kind of a way to go.
Yes, we do have a way to go. So we have approximately 23 minutes to cover what we'd allocated as 75 minutes of content. But I think this is a really good conversation and definitely worth building out the time for. So I want to present an option, because we've allocated about an hour just to the green space presentation that Mike Ford from South Base was going to cover. But in theory, we could try to cram it into the time we have left, but we could also set up a standalone time to do that topic a little more justice and allow time for conversation if you guys are amenable to that. How does that sound? No objections? All right, then we'll work to get that on the calendar. Then beyond that, we went ahead and touched on some of these later slides. And yeah, actually that would pretty much wrap things up. I'll just do a quick recap on the follow-up that we've identified in this conversation, and let me know if I missed anything, because a lot of follow-up came out of the discussion. So we're going to compile the feedback around the top 10 list and send you something to respond to. Also, we're going to resend out these added lists here. Don't hesitate to let us know if there's anybody missing from these lists. And you can do that through the survey we'll resend to you, or just through email, whatever your preferred method for communication on that front is. As usual, you can reach out to our contacts at the end here, Mike and Maggie. Then the other items, we're going to go ahead and send out the draft Clean and Renewable Energy Survey. That was put together by GreenLink Analytics, who has a lot of expertise, not just in building out great equity maps and clean energy modeling, but also in academic level rigor of survey drafting. So they've put together something they've thought through pretty carefully, and I'll go ahead and flag that a lot of the demographic questions in there are designed in such a way as to pull census data, which they say is very important for statistical significance. But the survey is going to touch on a lot of questions around how people think about clean energy in their community, what their priorities are, and otherwise. So we'd appreciate your review of this document, and just let us know if you see any critical issues that you think need to be addressed or warrant further conversation with the city, county. And with that stuff, because we're always happy to have conversations. So our next education series meeting, as of right now, is going to be energy systems and grid policy, and that'll be on November 4th. And we'll be bringing in Matt Cox from GreenLink to help facilitate that conversation, as well as the South Bay folks. And yes, so other follow-up I identified, well, in addition to sending out this list for you guys to make additions to, we'll also be asking for you to indicate if you have relationships with some of these organizations that could help us better engage them. Yeah, anything I'm missing there? Any other things that would be helpful to follow up with?
The only thing that I was left not being sure I had a clear direction on is on the charrettes. Is the recommendation from the cab to go self-select, or for us to lump and let people know that they can, participate in other charrettes as well? What's the feeling from the cab group? Self-select, or us kind of filling it in and inviting them, knowing that there will also be public options later. We're going to do the public segment where we go broad, community-wide in January after the holiday season.
I like the idea of them being able to self-select. I mean, you may, I don't know what the structure will be. I don't know if there's a need to limit certain charrettes to a certain size, and you kind of do it first come, first serve for each topic. But I think that that people are probably going to be comfortable sharing their information if they've chosen what they're going to share.
Great. I agree with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Are there any other follow-up items that you want to make sure we touch on?
Good from my end.
All right, then. If there are no objections, I'll give you guys 15 minutes back. and we'll be following up shortly with all the materials we just ran through. So thank you so much for your feedback here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you
very much.
Cheers.
Hey, take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.